I wanted to love Pathfinder Dice Conquest. It's a recognisable brand, has lots of dice, and is short and small enough to play on your dinner break. But after just 5 long sit downs with this one, where I played it multiple times in single sessions, I'm unfortunately getting rid of it because I really don't like this game at all. There are far too many problems I just can't ignore. Too much randomness, wild imbalances in heroes and encounters, along with solo games feeling wildly unbalanced and limiting. For something that I had to pay a premium for because of the rarity of this one in the UK, it pains me every time I look in its direction, knowing I probably won't get near to the price I paid for this, 35 quid, and that's more soul destroying than anything, as I always like to get value from every game I purchase. But alas, this one just isn't worth it for me, especially when some of my play sessions were me taking mulligans after my first rolls, wiping the game, and starting again. Gameplay wise though, Pathfinder Dice Conquest is a compact dungeon crawl style dice game where players take on the role of a hero attempting to survive a sequence of monster encounters before eventually confronting a boss. The entire experience is driven by dice rolls and card draws, creating a game that is easy to set up and quick to start. There are 6 heroes in the game. Each hero represents a different class and comes with their own unique abilities, and sometimes small variations in how they interact with enemies. The encounter deck consists of monster cards and 1 boss card that you choose at the start of the game. All other monster cards are shuffled together to form the main encounter pile and placed on top of the boss, with you drawing 3 every turn to fight, often on top of ones you didn't destroy last round. This is meant to symbolise you basically going through the dungeon and starting combat encounters, where you will roll every dice to produce potential actions, such as straight up attacking or activating a special effect, and the faces of the dice determine what you actually do on your turn, with some encounters needing specialist dice rolls like only odd or even dice, or exact results. And this is where the core puzzle of the game lies, as you have to place your dice onto every monster to defeat their health and finish them off, gaining their card once you've done so, and gaining either a new power or a specialised item that will help you throughout the rest of the game. Every monster only dealing damage to you if you haven't done enough damage to kill them. And you can either leave dice on top of the monsters as you draw 3 more into the fight, or you reclaim everything and go again, hoping you can stay alive long enough to gain better dice rolls to eventually fight one of the 3 bosses. And that's pretty much all this game has to offer. It's white quick, has a small play area, box, and unfortunately leads to many of my issues. The worst of which is how heavily this game leans on luck. Dice are obviously central to the experience, and randomness itself isn't necessarily a flaw so long as bad dice rolls can be mitigated in some ways. Many excellent games use dice as a way to introduce uncertainty and excitement while still rewarding clever decision making. The problem with Pathfinder Dice Conquest is that the randomness often overwhelms the strategy. Countless times during my plays, I found myself making what felt like the right choices, only for everything to collapse because the dice refused to cooperate. Bad rolls here can derail entire turns, leaving you unable to deal with the monsters in front of you, meaning more monsters emerge, and you just get so overwhelmed your entire run collapses in on itself. Conversely, there are moments where success comes far too easy simply because the dice happen to line up perfectly. Like rolling a certain number like 18 on an enemy that only needs that to destroy it, resulting in a game where your fate can be determined more by probability than the puzzle itself or planning. And after just a couple of failed attempts, the luck factor here really began to grind away at me. I love strategy games. I love puzzle games. I want difficult decisions. I want to feel like I've learned something from my failure during my games so I can learn and come back stronger to take down my giant next time. That should matter in games like this. Decisions should feel meaningful, and victory should come from navigating difficult situations with skill and precision. Instead, here I was only left with thinking, well, that roll was a bit rubbish. Now I'm kind of screwed, and the dice gods and game are just going to ruin my experience this afternoon. I might as well scrap this round and start again. And for me, not seeing a means of victory other than roll well is unfortunately pretty soul destroying. The game's lack of control feeds into another problem. The game's surprisingly shallow decision space at first glance. It looks like there's something interesting here to make tactile choices with. You're managing a hero, you're facing monsters and trying to allocate dice to overcome different threats. In theory, this creates a puzzle where you must decide the most efficient way to survive each encounter. But the puzzle's unfortunately never that deep. Once you kind of understand the basic rhythm of the game, most turns involve obvious decisions rather than meaningful dilemmas. You roll your dice, assign them where they fit, and hope that's enough. Occasionally there's a moment where you have to choose between two imperfect options, but those moments are not frequent enough to sustain long-term engagement, creating a strange identity crisis for this one. Yes, it's light filler, but it lacks strategic depth that I was hoping to achieve to draw me in, and that I've definitely received from other light filler games like Cursed Castle, for instance. Here, after my initial learning phase where I was hoping for something more puzzling, I quickly realised you just place dice where you can and leave it at that, and it was just deeply disappointing for me. Especially when the wildly imbalanced characters don't help. Part of the appeal of a fantasy adventure is experimenting with different heroes and discovering unique playstyles. Ideally, each character should feel viable while offering a different approach to the challenges ahead, but that's not the experience I discovered. Some heroes simply appear stronger or more reliable than others. The Barbarian, for example, lets you change the result of twos and lets you take 1 damage to reroll dice, whilst the Monk, by far the strongest I experience, lets you place 2 dice with the same number on a monster and then just take 1 back, along with you changing any 7 rolls to basically whatever you want. There's a reason he was the only one I actually defeated a boss with. He felt broken, whilst Magnus was rubbish. I only really getting to destroy 10 health from a monster, and when one option consistently feels like the safest or most effective choice, the excitement of choosing between heroes genuinely starts to disappear. This imbalance becoming especially noticeable in solo play, where because you only have 1 hero per run, a weaker character can make an already unpredictable game feel brutally unforgiving. Playing solo only, I found that experimenting with different builds or approaches just felt like I was handicapping myself going outside of a powerful hero who can hold his ground, especially when the difficulty itself of the monster deck is another area where the game can feel inconsistent. As I said earlier, encounters depend on one massive shuffled deck of monsters, and that can often lead to a wild concoction of monsters drawn in threes. Draw 3 easy monsters with low numbers and no powers, and you'll blitz through them all early. Draw a massive numbered monster, or even 3 of them early on, and it's game over. You just don't have enough power early doors to take them down. In theory, this unpredictability should add tension. In practice, it can create moments where defeat feels inevitable rather than earned. Bad combination of monsters drawn combined with a streak of unlucky dice rolls can leave you with very few meaningful options, except scrap that run and start again. And I experienced that a lot during my 5 sit downs here, getting so bad during my first 3 cards drawn that if I didn't get the right combination of monsters to face, I would just reshuffle early and go again. And that's just not good enough game design for me when you feel like you have to cheat its system to have a somewhat decent experience. The experience becoming really frustrating in solo play, which was one of the main reasons I was interested in this game in the first place. Pathfinder Dice Conquest technically supports a single hero experience, but my life, it doesn't feel like the game was ever balanced around that mode. A lone hero just lacks the flexibility that multiple heroes provide, and certain encounters, because of the lack of dice rolls, are just insurmountable. Playing with 3 heroes improves the odds a lot in my experience, but it also undermines the simplicity that originally made the game appealing. What was meant to be a quick portable solo adventure suddenly becomes a more complex juggling act where you have to control 3 heroes, all with different powers, rerolls, dice changing capabilities, and health pools, and this can feel overwhelming with you inevitably forgetting certain abilities at certain points. Replayability also suffers from a lack of variety. After only a handful of plays, the game begins to feel repetitive. The pool of bosses and encounter variations isn't large enough to keep things feeling fresh. Once you've faced the same enemy multiple times, the sense of discovery fades as quickly as random Pokemon encounters in the grass outside Pallet Town. This game is supposed to be built around repeated runs, and so the lack of monsters alongside the randomness of their encounters becomes a significant weakness. Without expansions or additional content, the experience feels like you're repeating the same dungeon over and over again, stuck like Sam in Quantum Leap rather than embarking on new adventures every time. Perhaps the most surprising disappointment is how little thematic presence the game ultimately has. I don't know the Pathfinder IP. I know it's a separate D&D style fantasy setting, but the game doesn't tap into that campaign style strength. The experience is abstract. There's no real narrative to the game. There's no talk of what your hero is doing, why they are fighting these monsters. There's no story to the bosses. It's essentially just roll dice, assign them to different monsters with no sense of story, progression, or world building. Maybe you'll get more out of this if you already know the world, but not all of us do, and we should be catered for just a little bit, I feel. And it makes this game just a little bit less, as without meaning, the game has to have a great core gameplay loop, and as I've stated, that loop was just unenjoyable for me. Some of you might be able to overlook these faults. Some of you might like just rolling dice and placing them to give you the feeling of a quick dungeon crawl. But for me, there's way too much randomness and repetition with a terrible undeveloped solo-only mode, and it just killed all my enthusiasm and enjoyment. That's why I need to sell this one and hope it gets some of my money back. For me, a board game collection should be filled with games you're excited to play, not ones you keep out of obligation. And I honestly hated my experience with Pathfinder Dice Conquest. I kept playing to try and eke out some form of value with the price I paid, but hopefully the person whom buys this from me has a love for the IP and a group of friends to take more away from this one than I ever did. This one is definitely a pass. Wasn't good enough. But thanks for watching.